This week on the Yoakum Strength Podcast, we have on Eugene Bleecker. Eugene is the 108 Performance founder, which is a center specializing in baseball and softball performance, and the director of player development. He has worked with athletes of all levels, including countless players in the MLB. Throughout the episode, they talk about movement efficiency, adaptations versus limitations, his thoughts on athlete self-organization, and having the expertise to know what methods and tools will work for different types of athletes. As always, thanks for listening and enjoy the episode.
Before we hit the intro music, I wanted to introduce to you guys the Yoakum Strength Insider. The Yoakum Strength Insider is our online training platform that takes all of the ideas that we talk about on this podcast and implements them into a program that is available to you at the touch of your fingers. Our goal with the Yoakum Strength Insider is to create better movers, to level up your life, and to move forward from where you are. We do this in a holistic fashion. Not only will you receive a program that has helped hundreds of people become better movers, you'll also receive access to our app that allows you to track everything, has video links for all exercises, and allows you to be in constant communication with the Yoakum Strength coach. Along with this, you'll get our 30-page PDF nutrition and lifestyle guidelines. That includes everything from what to eat, how much of it to eat, why we're eating it, meditation habits, and other lifestyle habits that we implement with our clients to really level up their lives. If you're interested in trying out one of these programs, use podcast 25 in the discount section right before you pay for 25% off your first program.
Boom. This is the Yoakum Strength Podcast. Take the leap down the rabbit hole with us as we interview elite level guests to unravel what high performance really is.
All right, well, Coach, welcome to the podcast. I'm excited to have you here.
Excited to be here, man. Thanks for having me on, Austin.
We just had 20 minutes of a masterclass of some philosophy around strength conditioning that would have been a entire podcast in and of itself that provided more value than some 2-hour podcast I've listened to. So I'm excited for this, like really, really, truly excited for this podcast. I was talking to you. I was introduced to your methods when I met with my BP partner. I posted a ton of YouTube videos hitting with him, Dan File, and he just brought me in. We were like swinging one day. He's like, dude, try this drill. I tried and was like, I was doing some close stance stuff. I'm like, what was that? What'd you just have me do, dude? You just fixed like 7 of my issues in one thing. He's like, yeah, dude, now try this like curry look back. Try some of this deceleration work. I was like, man, what are you doing to me? Like, how are you seeing all this? He's like, no, dude, this isn't mine. Like, just go look at 108. Just send me your guys' page. And I shit you not, I spent the next like probably 5 hours deep diving into your guys' content. And this is probably a year or so now since that point, and I have not stopped. I've watched every YouTube video you guys have put out. Like I've been fully sold on your guys' method and the approach to this, not only the swing, but I think there's so many things you guys do that just like general philosophies can be taken and applied to any team sport athlete, or just the general, like you called it the foundations of beliefs that you have about your system and how we can apply this to any of our training methods when it comes to athletes. And I'm super interested in diving into some of those foundations, some of this deceleration work, and some of the swing specific work with you today. But one of the things that you mentioned when we were talking before we started recording was you had a lot of like some eye-opening moments where you're reading like some things, you're like, dude, that's maybe a little different than what I was taught like growing up or what I was taught from coaches before. What was that moment, like that light bulb moment where you were maybe doing a more traditional model, or you were doing some stuff and you're like, man, this really just isn't it. And then you tried something else. You're like, wow, that's something I need to dive into. That's a rabbit hole I need to go into.
For sure. That's a really good question, but it's not isolated to one moment. There have been a bunch of different, hugely impactful moments in my career. And what's really cool is, so I've always recorded everything, and it wasn't always for the purposes of like creating content. It was just to record and to have and to review. And I have a bunch of those moments actually like recorded and have video of some of those moments where the understandings kind of came to be. It's like ever since I was young, I searched for greatness in this game. And at first it was my own. And then when you transition and becoming a coach, nothing is about you. It's always about the athlete in front of you. And when I started coaching, like everybody else, I leaned on all the things that I was taught. And I went to an academy for a long time. I learned from some incredible coaches. And, you take those things as it's like the word of God himself because they're at the highest level and they've done it before. And then I was led to understandings that kind of took me away from that because, slow motion analysis and right view pro and conventions and speeches I heard. And I started to come to this understanding that, like, nothing I knew was true. It's like here you have this person that tells you to swing down, and then this guy practices swinging down, and then this guy shows you video in slow motion of that same person, and then they're actually not swinging down. And then it's like, wait, what? Right? So that kind of blew up my whole world. So imagine the foundational beliefs that you have as a human being and who you identify yourself as completely blows up in your face, right? So then you kind of hit this moment where it's like, okay, game on. And then I just started pouring through, I created this deep-seated, I already had the obsession, but it created this deep-seated obsession with like trying to figure it out. And I started going into everything. I studied every hitting book, every hitting coach, Lau to Epstein to Wallenbrock to like anything and anyone that I could find, going on to the, batspeed.com, baseball fever to like go the old message boards and stuff. And it was the same thing for throwing and pitching, arm injuries started to come about. That became a hugely prevalent thing. I was in California at the time, so I started to study under Tom House in the NPA, and then it was, getting to, study Texas baseball ranch stuff from Wolf Forth that had gotten huge, and then it was this obscure stuff by this guy named Kyle Bodie and Driveline. That was all the way back in like 2010, 2011. And then I got to this point where it's like after I did all of those things and researched everything I possibly could inside and around the game, the things that I was seeing and being told were not lining up with truth.
Mm.
The thing about truth is that it's true all of the time, not some of the time. So if you're going to tell me that this is true and that if we do this, that this is going to work, but then it doesn't work all the time, well, what am I supposed to tell the 50% of the athletes that are sitting in front of me or the 80% that it's not working for? Like, I'm not satisfied with that. So I had to go into more obscure research and starting to dig into, motor learning and skill acquisition and anatomy and physiology and kinesiology and biomechanics and it just created this whirlwind of pouring and digging through information. And I guess after going through all the old stuff and then going through all the new stuff, I got to this point where it was like, okay, I want to pretend like I know nothing when I'm looking at it, right? But I need to understand even more deeply like how this system, because you always have to go back to first principles. What is the first place from which a thing is known? So it's like if you don't understand the design of the human body and you don't understand the true nature of how, because there's a lot of different ways you could conceivably throw a ball or swing a bat, but there's only so many, right? And before you can understand how that is done, you have to understand the human being and how they're put together to actually execute the task. And as I went down that rabbit hole on this side, and then on the same token used fresh eyes on this side and pretended like it, like instead of seeing red cars, it's like pretending like you don't know anything. And the whole world opened up. And like I started seeing these shapes and patterns and movement that existed through all of the greatest players that have ever played the game. And it's like on the outside, you could see different positions, right? Or the bone structure lined up differently, but you could tell that the mechanisms and the engines underneath the hood, right, was happening the same way in all of these great players. Like because they make it look so easy and what they produce is so incredible. And then when I started to see this with 12-year-olds and 13-year-olds and see the same thing in youth, it was like, oh my God, right? So
Dude,
that foundation that you were talking about, like there's a lot of things that get misunderstood and misapplied in science, in the world, in sports science especially. And in most programs, it's like the player has to go to the model. Like everyone does these 6 drills, and this is the swing that we teach, and this is how we train. But our model, there's a foundation to the home, right? And the foundation is that the human body is a fascially driven, okay, reciprocally moving biotensegrity model. As long as every human body is built with a fascial system that's responsible for, a locomotion, holding us upright, stabilizing us, protecting us, and as long as our upper and lower bodies are designed to move in a constant flux of opposite directions, right? The foundation to our home at 108 Performance is never going to change because that's the foundation to all human movement, right? Like if you kick a ball with your right leg, your left shoulder better get across your right leg really, really fast, right? If you want to create tension in the middle of a system, you better move the top and the bottom in opposite directions, right? And that was the work that I was mentioning earlier by Grakovetsky, and the subsequent stuff by Ingber that kind of led me to these understandings. So that's the foundation. And then it's an open floor plan, right? Because the individuality exists in that all of us have different brains that perceive information differently. What we think to do versus what we actually do are different. And then, everybody has different length of levers, ranges of motion in their joints, different degrees of available slack in the system. If somebody has more range in their thoracic spine, their initial setups and positionings need to be different. If somebody has a more limited range of motion in their back hip, say, they're going to need to design their movements differently or position themselves differently, And one of the unique things is that, it's like the SAID principle, because you mentioned the skill acquisition thing and Yerby and Mishka. And it's like we've gotten to this point in sport where people look at the outside of the human body and they say, oh, well, we can let these people self-organize because the human body is gonna design and adapt to the task, and people are gonna find the most. But then on the same token, we don't want to do that when it comes to the inside of the body, do we? We want to assess the human body and we want to assess its ranges of motion or how we perceive what it's supposed to be in our minds as a model. And then we want to say how that person's body is internally designing itself must be wrong, rather than recognizing that all sporting movement is also an exercise. And anytime you place tasks on the body, it's going to adapt to the imposed demands of the task, and then it's going to build up certain mechanisms internally to help the body achieve those tasks more efficiently, because all biological systems crave efficiency. And the more we do it, the more our body is going to lean into those things. But then we test people and we say, oh, that person has limitations. There's a whole bunch of limitations. They got internal rotation limitation in their back hip. They got this, they got that. Rather than saying, I wonder if that's actually an adaptation rather than a limitation. And if we look at it differently, we might be able to understand what's actually happening and stop injuring our athletes.
Dude,
Because that's one of the biggest reasons we deal with injuries in sport right now is by people in sports science, specifically the strength and conditioning community, that because they have a base level degree and some sort of base level knowledge, that they need to check all the boxes of all the people above them that tell them these things, and they spit it out like it's coming down from the mouth of God himself, right? That this is how it is, and none of you know anything because I have a degree. Oh, yeah? Well, you have a whole bunch of athletes that keep getting hurt. And you don't seem to be doing a great job of individually looking to understand why whatever it is that you're doing might not be working. And why, oh, if it's about muscle, then how come we could take this 15 that weighs 175 pounds, stick him in a biomechanics lab, and he throws 94 miles an hour and only has 37 Newton meters of valgus, right? I wonder why. And you have this 6'4", 225-pound Division II pitcher that throws 82 and feels like his freaking arm is going to fall off every time he throws a baseball. But it's about muscle, guys. It's about muscle. We know everything. Yeah.
That's you summed up about 10 years of our podcast right there in one little chunk there. One of the things you were talking about where it was like you were being told all of these things. And for me, it was like I was being told all these things. And for a while, I was like listening to all these things. I'm like, this is the truth. And I had one of my mentors at St. Thomas was just sliding me pieces of paper. So, like, one of the things was like, what was that?
Went to St. Thomas?
Yes, yep.
What, did you play baseball there?
I was a football player, never played baseball. So, the softball addiction is my baseball, like, I feel like my little kid baseball addiction that
How
I
old
have.
are you? How old are you?
29.
Huh. You're a little bit older than he is, but I have a longtime student that I actually mentioned in my book that went to St. Thomas.
Really? Yeah, I was the strength coach there for the football team for 5 or 6 years.
Okay. You didn't come across Jake Higgins, did you?
I don't think so, but I recognize the name. I'll look him up after this to see if we have any connections.
Yeah, that's funny.
Yeah,
Cool.
but I was kind of in this traditional model of strength conditioning, what I was taught growing up, and what I was kind of put through as a strength coach. And I had this mentor who was he was underneath a lot of Sean Mishka's and like Tyler Yerby stuff, and he would just slide me some of Tyler Yerby stuff, slide me some of Sean Mishka stuff, and he's like, okay, you don't want these type of movement patterns, but you look at these athletes and like these athletes are doing in game. Why? Like, what is that? And then he finally convinced me to go to one of these movement meetups, and it was the first time I had been exposed to some of this outside stuff where I was looking at, I'm like, oh my God, these guys know what the fuck they're talking about. Like this is actually what's happening. I started to play around with this stuff. And I was like getting these ideas planted in my head. Then COVID hit, lost my access to my comfort zone, which was the weight room. Like I was listening to all these ideas, but I still had my weight room, man. Like I was still had all of my pretty like squat patterns and everything like that I was doing with these athletes. That was all taken away. And I had to go into some of this actual stuff that I was exploring because we no longer had a weight room. All we had is the field and we were playing around with this stuff. We started to implement some of these philosophies with our athletes with no weights. They were getting stronger, they were moving better, they were feeling better, and I was like, wow, there's absolutely something to this skill acquisition piece, to this movement variability piece that we're working with our athletes. Some of this like self-organizing piece that we're working with our athletes. I'm like, this needs to be something we need to dive deeper into. And one of the things that I really enjoy about your principles and your philosophy, and you mentioned it when we were talking before, where it's like it's not about finding a swing or the swing or the movement pattern, which is something like I had been taught for so long. It's like, we need to make this perfect. We need to make this pretty. We need to make this clean. And when I was doing that with my strength conditioning, all the athletic directors, all the football coaches were like, yeah, this stuff is amazing. This is like, you're doing everything right. And you know what? All my athletes were like, what the fuck are we doing, man? Like, this sucks. And like, dude, I was working for the athletic director and the sport coaches instead of my athletes right in front of my face. And as soon as I switched, the people that got pissed at me were the athletic directors and the sport coaches, and the people that love me now were the athletes. And I mean, the sport coaches liked it because we were getting injured less after we were doing it. But like when they're watching the training sessions and it was like a little sloppier, a little messier, a little more self-organized, we were going through, they were the ones mad at me. I'm like, it was such a mindset shift. But one of the things that I love about your principle is it's not about finding the swing or the movement pattern. It's about finding their swing and their movement pattern and the one that works with them. And that approach, man, is it would be such a game-changing approach for not just any baseball coach, but any coach in general, whether it's just strength conditioning, whether it's just if you're a sprint coach, whether it's just if you're a football coach, but like allowing them to find what works with them. And like you were saying, not limitations, but an adaptation that can work with their body.
For sure. But so I want to be clear about something. That is all factual and true, but underneath the hood, right? There are patterns of movement that we are absolutely looking for that need to and have to happen that showcase whether or not the person is moving as efficiently as they are capable, right? The thing is, you're just not always going to be in the same positions with the joints, and you'll have, because of differences in length of levers and ranges of motion and available slack in the system, there's variation that has to be allowable and is necessary. So what that basically means is every person's most efficient movements that line them up to be the best hitter or be the best pitcher, they're not going to have the same stride length. They're not going to have the same direction. They're not going to have the same directional angle. Like their femur or their foot is not going to be placed in the same exact spot, right? But underneath the hood, the same mechanisms are happening at the right timing, in the right moment, in the right sequences. That's the key, right? So it's like there is a those foundational principles that exist for us, are based on the human design and God's design for human beings and for human movement, like that's the foundation. Everything else works around it, right? So it's like, yes, self-organization, but like people, I think, look at self-organization in the wrong way because it's like if you mentioned novel tasks or novice learners earlier, I forget which one. All of the research on self-org and motor learning comes out of like the Netherlands and Australia. And when you really start digging into it, all of it is based on novel tasks and novice learners, right? So none of it is based on taking an already hardwired CNS system and changing its function.
Hmm.
And that's a really important distinction. Now, when it comes to football, many of the things that you're doing, they're more reactive. They're not going to be done in the same constraints, right? Because there's more limits around the lines of what we do inside of like baseball and softball or golf or tennis, right? Where, the repeatability of certain things, right? And the repeatability of economy of motion and efficiency and lining your system up, you can preset those things, right? Does that kind of make sense? Like there's certain angles or positions that are going to be necessary for a particular individual based on their design,
Mhm.
right? Yeah, does that make sense to
No,
you?
100%. And that is something that I'm super interested in talking to you about because that is what I see. You talked about how you're able to get your message across faster now. Like that's something that you got really efficient at. And that is something, dude, it's like watching you. It's because you talked about like the self-emergence, like kind of thought process. And when a coach gets into this, and I'm guilty of this myself when I started, it's like give the athletes let them try as many tools as possible, and hopefully one of them sticks and one of them works, and they like one of those tools, right? What I watch, and this has been my journey in the skill acquisition world too. It's like you're noticing something, you're seeing something, and then you give them a tool that you're like 85 to 90% sure you're gonna like this tool, you're gonna like this field. And like that's something, dude, that like when I watch you work with an athlete, it's like you know what tool to give them. Like you know what it's not that you're forcing them into it. And then like because there's two very different like principles there. It's like you have a huge tool set. It's not because I think a lot of coaches just have one, they have a hammer, man. They just smash it. And whoever likes the hammer and whoever the hammer works with, man, it's the survivorship bias and it's going to work for those athletes. But like you said, the other 60% of athletes, it's like, okay, the hammer doesn't work for me. And maybe I need a screwdriver. One of the things I love about your approach and like how you're watching like athletes move, it's like, you know what tool they're going to enjoy for the most part. What's that process like in your head when you're doing this? It's like, you just have so many reps in the game of like, I've seen this before. I know where I need to get to and what you need to feel or what I think you're going to feel here because it's like you do have that balance of like you do want them to come to that feel by themselves, but you know how to direct it. You know what I mean? Like it's not just throwing everything at the wall.
Yeah, it's that here's the interesting thing. A lot of high level athletes, it's like they don't want to come to the understanding by themselves. They just want you to tell them what to do and tell them the right thing and they feel it. It's like, yes, that's it. And then that's what I was looking for. And then they can repeat it, right? So it's like there's a the way that as coaches it's like everybody wants to look at it as there's this model of how it's supposed to happen, like we're not supposed to say internal cues, we're not supposed to say all of that is nonsense. Like what we're supposed to as coaches give the athlete whatever it is that they need to or what it is that they're searching for to become their best version of themselves. That's the ultimate goal, is their success. How we get there, there's no rights or wrongs to that. And people want to live in this world of black and white, that you can say this and you can't say that, or you have to do this or you have to do that. And the reality is like, people have been having success in this game for a long time. I would just say that and from a coaching perspective, it's not that coaches have never made players better and we're just finally understanding that. It's that coaches that have had success in the past, they hit the right thing for the right athlete at the right time. But the problem they run into is trying to make everybody else do the same thing,
Mhm.
right? studying so many different people and understanding the body on a very different level, like everything needs to be in play. So when you get a lot of reps, you start to see certain things and shapes and patterns of movement with certain individuals that have similar body types or similar ranges of motion. Like, if somebody has tiny little legs and a really long torso, or if somebody is an extreme supinator or an extreme pronator, or somebody has really a huge rib cage, or they have a tight upper body with short little levers, right? Like some of those things are unique, but like DNA. But there's a whole bunch of people that kind of look the same, right? So it's like bucketing, right? And then your brain, you start to understand the right areas to bucket things. And that's one of the things we've been working on building here at 108 for a long time now is those buckets. So we have a whole bunch of coaches here. This is not just me that are able to walk athletes through our assessment process and get incredible career and life-changing results, sometimes in 20 or 30 minutes. Like we've had big leaguers come in here and they've never thrown a pitch in a game above 93. And 20 minutes into their first bullpen, they're sitting 96 to 98. And like everybody freaks out. Like, yeah. And I guess the question about like for me personally, I had one of the coaches ask me last night because there was an athlete in the cage, and he was hitting balls like, 83, 85, 86, 81, 77. And I explained to him, like, if you do this and you pull this off, like you're going to catch a 94. And literally the next swing he hit 95. And the coach was like, like how do you how does that even, and I think that it's just it's reps and it's obsession, and I was just really blessed, man. I think that the Lord gave me eyes to see, and a mouth to share what it is that I see. And I think the longer you seek wisdom, and the longer you seek the treasures, and the deeper that you dig and the more crap you're willing to dig through to get there, that on the other side of that, that it shall be given and you get rewarded. And I have, and we have, and it's been a wild journey, because it's a really crazy thing to have one percenters get so much better. Like like the work with Laureano last year. Like this guy's 31 years old. He's getting signed as a fourth outfielder to hit against lefties for the Orioles, and he finished as like a top 10 hitter in Major League Baseball in a whole bunch of major offensive categories. He went from like a $4 million deal to being like a 18 to $24 million a year player. And it took literally an evaluation, and then one session together, and then Zooms to keep up through the season. So yeah, it's wild.
Well, that was something you mentioned at the start of the podcast, is trying to get one percenters better, right? And that is something that I think, especially in the strength conditioning world, it's so when I was at St. Thomas, we were Division III to start when I was a strength coach there, transitioned to the Division I route. And when I coached the Division I route, I had such an eye-opening experience of what working with Ferraris was like, dude. I was like, all the strength coaches everybody looks up to and all the numbers they put up, you're like, oh my God, that's the best strength coach in the world. I was like, dude, this is the easiest job I've ever had in my life. I tell an athlete to do something, they look at me, and it's something that took 3 weeks for a Division III athlete to learn. They look at me, they're like this, coach? I'm like, yep, like that. Like their ability, like that is something that I picked up on, is like the one percenters, the Ferrari's ability to adapt and like learn a new skill is unbelievable. But you also do have like the skill wells where it's like, like the central nervous system is wired to do something. And if they were told something to do something, and I think that's something that a lesser athlete is, and I would consider myself this, like it almost just takes more reps to get out of that skill well when you're a lesser athlete compared to those like high feel based athletes. What is kind of that approach when you're working with a one percenter or one percenter to like actually get results? Because that's something it's like all these coaches are like, yeah, we have 15, let's say it's just verticals. Like that's something that they measure in the strength conditioning a lot. We have 15 guys jumping over 40 plus in a verticals because of our program. It's like, no, I coach these Division One athletes. 15 guys came in jumping a 40-inch vertical. Did you get them past that 40-inch vertical, or did they just come in with that 40-inch vertical? Like those are two very different things of just having high outputs or actually increasing that one percenter's ability to produce those outputs. And I'm sure you see that a lot in the baseball world too, where it's like it's almost more of a recruiting game for their like facilities. Like they're just bringing in better athletes, but are you actually making those better athletes better, or are they just freak athletes that were just really good right away and they're just staying kind of baseline where they're at? What's that approach like for you when you're working with a dog, dude? You're not even working with Division One athletes. You're working with Hall of Fame Major League Baseball players. Like that's four steps above a Division One athlete. Like what is that process like?
Well, is it an athlete that's coming in for the first time, or is an athlete that we already have an established relationship with?
Dude, I love the athletes that come in for the first time. I think that is one of the coolest things where I watch one of your videos and you got some of these dogs and you're like, no, dude, like you've been doing, like you said, 30 years old. You've been doing this for baseball 25 years. You probably started when you're 5 years old, and you give them something that like unlocks a 30-year-old's ability to like perform, which is wild to me. And dude, I mean, I felt it as like a decent athlete. Like I tried some of the things Dan had me do, and it was like an instant, like fast. It was fast of like, oh my God, I could have been doing this for another 5 years by myself and not found these unlocks in this way.
Yeah. So we go through an evaluation process, right? And the first part of that is sitting down with the athlete and having an extended conversation on, their training history, their playing history, reviewing video from as far back as we can get from when they were young. So like when they were 12 years old, 13 years old, 14 years old, and they were the best player in the state, the best player on their team. We want to try to get information from as far back as we can, because the truth is generally the farther back you go, the better you see the accuracy of how their body was designed to move versus how they've now learned how to force it to move,
Mm.
right? And your best athletes are also your best compensators. So there's plenty of guys who, they might be a big leaguer, but they're a big leaguer because they have an amazing skill or skill set and this incredible body that's able to deal with some of these things and still get away with it. But it doesn't mean that they're optimizing who they are or what they're capable of inside of their sport. Right. So the better we start to understand their training history, their thoughts, their feels, what's become important to them, and then reviewing video and then getting on the same page about what it is that we do here, right? Because if you give someone here's the thing about skill acquisition that people don't realize when it comes to working with elites, right? If you do something in a cage and the athlete at that level doesn't know what they're doing and they get a result to happen, it's not like it's automatic where they're just going to keep doing it that way. Like that's not how it works. If you could elicit a result with a different kind of bat or a different kind of movement in a drill, but then when they go back to functioning in their regular work, right, taking swings in batting practice or in a game or over in a bullpen, like they revert right back to doing the same thing, right? Because their brain has no understanding of if it's important, what it feels like when it happens differently, and how they can continue to optimize and make that thing show up in an in a reactionary a way that's instantaneous, right? Does that make sense?
Yes, and dude, that's one of the things that I think is cool is the ability to get that skill to stick. Because like, and I fall into this myself too, where like I've had unlocks with Dan trying some of your stuff, and then like I'll spend 2 weeks by myself, and I like completely lose the feel of what I was trying to feel. Like that like oh that unlock I lost it. And like one of the best things for me that I've actually changed is doing like a hitting journal. Dude, it's been so nice to like when I fall into like an old skill well, I go back to my hitting journal. I'm like, oh, this was a feel you're feeling. Like, see if you can get that feel or see if you can get that drill. And it did like pulls me back into what I wanted to pull me back into. But trying to have that process, especially in like the baseball world, where I'm sure you're working with some of these athletes, and then they go and like work with a different hitting coach for a while. I know, especially when we go like with college athletes, we have this where they feel like we're getting unlocks with them. We're talking about it. And then it's like, yeah, dude, I went back to my coach and I was just fed so much other information and like kind of lost it and had to come back out. Like that process has to be, I mean, I'm sure stressful for you too, but like trying to get that athlete to understand what is good information when they're
Yeah,
fed so much stuff.
stressful. It's stressful and frustrating, and
Yeah. Yeah.
Most of the time it's well intentioned, but sometimes it's just very ego driven. Like we have an athlete in our draft prep program, and I'm not going to blow up the school or the coach, but I'm just going to say that like, this kid came out here. So first of all, we started with him over the summer, and the reason he started with us is because he had multiple friends that were drafted in the first couple of rounds that had been training with us for a really long period of time. Since they were 9, 10, 11, 12 years old, right? And then he felt like he was leaving a lot on the table, and this is his draft year upcoming, and he was interested in seeing what it was about. So we started with him. We did the evaluation. We started with him over the towards the end of the summer, and like within 2 weeks after our first session, he had an in-game PR. He had a ball like 106 or 107, and he had never done that before, right? And then he ends up flying out here. We spend a week together and go through the evaluation process and digging in. And we had him hitting balls up to 112 in a cage. So like he had never even hit balls 107. He's not a big kid either. Like, and he hadn't hit balls 107 in a game before. Now he's popping 112s in a cage, and he's sitting like 103, 105, 106. Like it was pretty special. Like his hands are absolutely electric. And he goes back, and it was to the point where he's got teammates that are like, Division I legitimate guys going to legitimate schools, and they're joking with him as batch juiced. Guys are trying to copy his swing. Like all of a sudden he's parking ball, like just it's different, right? The whole thing is different. And his coach was pissed off and didn't like where his hands were, and kept telling him that you're going to be steep, it's not going to hit. Yeah, yeah. Meanwhile, he's taking the most ridiculous BP they'd ever seen him take. He's parking balls left after right. And it's not like he's trying to swing as hard as he can. It's not like he's chasing bat speed. It's not like we're talking precisions, like swing after swing, like a surgeon. Yeah, like I don't understand how as a coach you see someone do something like that, and rather than say to yourself, "Oh my God, why couldn't I do that? What was I missing? Good for you. Let's go. What are you doing? How do I help?" Like you make it more about you and your program and the fact that you're not good enough to do that, rather than about the kid and his success and having their best interests in mind. The game is just weird like that. I can't ever understand that.
Yeah, dude, that I cannot imagine that frustration level that you would have there. One of the things that
Especially when you're talking about some kid's life. It's like,
millions of
well,
dollars on the table
yeah,
sometimes,
millions of dollars on the table, and
life changing.
sometimes it's a Division II scholarship, but if the kid's been working for something and he found something and it works, like, because at the end of the day, like if the athlete isn't bought in, or they are bought in, like, and they're getting like if they're not bought into what you're doing, it doesn't matter. You should just leave them alone anyway. And if they are bought into something and it is working, like we have to do a better job as a coaching community of recognizing, just being objective. Be objective about your work. Like be real. Like look at the athletes in front of you, and instead of being more concerned with, like, from an S&C perspective, with like I know this and I know that, like, okay, man, like, did the kid get injured or did he not? And like, what role could you have played, or could the program have played in doing that? Like, okay, so you've been in a weight room a long time. Let me ask you a question. How do basketball players squat? Do they squat well?
No,
No, they don't. And that's not, now I just made a statement about a population of human beings, didn't I? It wasn't about one athlete, right? It was just about a population of human beings, regardless of their race, regardless of how tall they are, right? Because in a sport like that, one of the most important skills is having a vertical, right? The ability to instantaneously whack, explode out of the ground. Well, people always want to say in strength and conditioning, well, we got to improve your range of motion here. And then all we got to do is just add strength on the back end of that. That's all we got to do. That's all we got to do, guys. That's what the book says. Except if you were to take a basketball player with a 44-inch vert and then make him squat to the ground and tell him his hips are a limitation for his health and his success, you're going to destroy his ability to jump and react and move, and you're likely going to create the environment for him to get injured because you're changing the length of strings and tension in his system. He's able to instantaneously create super stiffness and completely explode out of the ground. And as soon as you start playing around with loosening the strings that are creating the environment for that system to work, you're screwing around with that guy's ability to do it. And then all of a sudden, he's going to go to do the same thing, but it's going to slip. There won't be stability. There's no more ability to create super stiffness. You know, how people view it. It's like all the best athletes in the world, like there's certain things that their bodies share, right? A lot of them have flat feet. They lack dorsiflexion. They have tight hamstrings. They have a tight low back. They have tight hips, right? Because they have the ability to like instantaneously stabilize with super stiffness and change direction, which for me, I think is the most important thing in many sports, right? And that happens to be scientifically studied, and I happen to agree with that study because that's what you see. That's the separator, like James Harden. He doesn't have the highest vert. He's not the fastest guy. I don't even think he's in the top 50th percentile in those. But what he does do better than everybody else is change direction, right? And that's that instantaneous stability and change of course. And that's why, like, because you mentioned earlier that you think it applies to other sports. Like, we do not advertise that we work with NFL quarterbacks. We do not advertise that we've worked with MMA fighters. We do not advertise that we've worked with pro golfers or pro long drivers. But we literally get results in everything. We've had all of those things reach out. We've gotten tangible, factual results that you can prove with data in all of those sports, not because of the understanding of the human body and how it's designed to move. And if you train it properly inside of those windows and parameters, the things that you see, the feel that they get, the way it trains their body is incredible. It's like everybody in S&C wants to look at strength as or strength and conditioning for your sport. Like, we got to build a cane corso. Cane corso is it. That's it. That's what you need for everything. Except if you were going to design a dog to run a race and the race requirement was to build up as, speed in this window of 1,000 yards from here to here, and then make a sharp left-hand turn, and then in 100 yards, jump over a hurdle and run past the finish line, would you build a cane corso? Probably not. Except we want to take these greyhounds that are already built like greyhounds and we want to force them into our human worldly understanding of what we understand strength should be and muscle should be, rather than recognizing that, again, the human body is a fascially driven, reciprocally moving biotensegrity model. I can't stress that enough. When you start to look at the design like that and understand how those implications affect human movement, especially in reactive movement in sport, it changes everything. For instance, okay, women's soccer. You're looking at women's soccer literally has an epidemic worse than baseball's UCL injuries, right? The ACL injuries and like anything knee related, like in women's soccer, is just absolutely incredible. Well, females naturally by nature have wider hip set, looser pelvis, looser fascial system, less upper body mass, and then they're going to college and even in high school, they're adding mass, right, and adding muscle, and then they're doing mobility work to boot when they're already really, really mobile. Like that's literally why that keeps happening. Like they're not working on creating any kind of instantaneous stability. They're checking these boxes of range of motion and they already are too rangy. They should be working on creating super stiffness in small ranges. None of those girls should be doing full range squats all the time. And none of them should be loading their spine like that. It's unnecessary. What we literally add to everybody's maxes and we never touch maxes. You don't even have to come close to it. Like if you imagine doing a squat or a farmer walk, right? And you have a barbell on your back and you have it loaded with all this weight, And then imagine you took all the weight off, you hang mobility bands from it, you hang a couple of 25 or 35-pound plates from the bands. Well, anytime you're moving, all of that instantaneous co-contraction that's created, well, that's your fascial system reacting, right? That's your fascial system that's stabilizing. That can only happen through reaction. Co-contraction can only happen through reaction. You can't manually create it. Now, if you're trying to make a bicep, I can sit here and I make a bicep. I can't make myself co-contract, right? So it's like if if you're looking at the Ferrari and the F350, they're designed for different tasks, and everybody's body has a Ferrari engine and has an F350 engine, and how you feed it, right, is how it's going to design. And for certain movements, you need more of this. For certain movements, you need more of that, right? So certain sports, more of this. Certain sports, more of this. Well, if you take a Ferrari and you try to tow 30,000 pounds up a mountain, you're going to tear the engine. If you take an F350 and you try to punch it off the line every time, you're going to tear the engine. Like does that make sense? Like,
Dude, that's something we talk about a lot on the podcast because it's like I think it's such a heavy bias of most strength coaches, myself included. Our background is being the F-150. You know what I mean? Like it's being the truck, it's being the mule, and those are things that have like allowed us, whether right or wrong, have allowed us to succeed. So like now we're like everybody needs to train this way. Everybody needs to do what we did to get to where we want to. And that was my question going through. But you said everybody has a Ferrari and an F-350 within them because that's what I was wondering. It's like, is there a difference in the way in which you train greyhounds and mules, or is it like you're trying to get everybody to be more of a greyhound and train that side of them within them?
it depends on the task. It depends on the task that their body is trying to design itself for. What is the outcomes that are necessary for them to succeed in their thing? So it's like you certain people I think have predisposed body types or tendencies for certain areas and need a little more of this or a little more of that, right? But on the same token, if there's a task you're trying to achieve and it's a task you're trying to achieve at the highest level of something, there's task requirements involved that you have to be able to meet to be able to do that, you know?
When you are talking about some of these, we talked about like you have objective
By
data.
the way, I just want to state clearly, like I'm also, because it's like sometimes it's like people know you through social media, and they everybody likes a 30-second clip, and then they develop these opinions, right? So it's like they'll see a tweet that I make, and I'm talking to a biomechanist. They, how come you're making it so difficult? Or they see a tweet that goes out, and it's meant for a hitting coach, and it's like, well, that's not how the body works. I just want to state clearly that I've had people that went to Harvard work for me. I've had biomechanists, DPTs, every three-letter, degree or three-letter, cert that you could imagine. I've studied everything from Vershansky, and I'm very familiar with West Side Barbell. I know all of the things that y'all know because you can get the same education in a public library that you can at Harvard if you read the right books. Okay. So I'm tired of people in the strength and conditioning community looking at the things that we do. I had somebody say the other day, they said something like, well, just because you've never had a good strength coach or can't run a strength program doesn't mean you should be talking about strength and conditioning like that. Okay, buddy. That ain't what's going on here, right? We're at a way different level, right? Been to where you've been, moved past it long time ago. And those are the things that get very frustrated. People don't want to dive deep. They don't want to understand. It's like we're so far ahead. People want to think we're behind, but that's just because they haven't spent the time to understand why we're doing what we're doing. And we're not the only ones doing it. We're not the only ones that view the human body this way. Like it's not just, have you ever spoken with do you know who Dan Paff is?
Yeah, yep,
Stu McMillan from Altus?
yep.
The incredible. Those guys are brilliant.
Because that is something that I wanted to talk to you about too, is you have it on the strength conditioning sense where everybody's like, I have the answer. I also think the new movement, and you see this, is like the fascial people where like they read like, let's say they read anatomy trains and they're like, I have everything figured out because I read anatomy trains. And you see them get stuck in this like like, dude, they're like they just went off on a totally different route of something that they don't know. You know what I mean? Like they just like read a book, but they don't actually know it. They don't actually know how to implement it, but now they're like super sure of themselves because they found a new Bible. And it's like
Well, that's
the
because that's because when you start going down the fascial route, it becomes easier and easier to recognize the truth inside of it the deeper you dive.
mm,
It's like people in strength and conditioning have been taught to view the body as these isolated pieces, right? It's like individual and isolated parts of muscle. Like when this guy does this movement, his lat is pulling on, or his like, no, that's not how this works. Like it's not the muscular system that's driving this thing. You have to look at the human body as an integrated system from tip to toe, and everything is influent. When things are moving well, there's no pieces that are uniquely and individually compensating. You're moving from tip to toe in this beautiful, like reciprocal movement where the endpoints are hitting just at the right time and the right ways with the right sequence and bounce, right? Like that when you start to see it that way and realize how the whole thing is integrated, it changes how you design any of the programs. It changes how you see movement. Like those two things, the seeing the body as an integrate, it's like, and this is what Ingber proved. I'm not making this up. That's what I'm saying. It's like you see these movements and it's like, oh my God, oh my God, oh my God. That guy's foot is in the air, but that guy's foot is on the ground, and this guy's at this angle, and that guy's at that angle. But what's happening inside is the same thing. It's the same thing happening at the similar timing and sequencing, right? It's the same. It's not the same position, but it's the same exact thing underneath the hood. What Donald Ingber at Harvard proved, where you're sitting right now, go look it up. His paper in SciAm, Scientific American, The Architecture of Life. Look at the work that he did at Yale. Go to the background of the study. I literally, in the book that I have published, Old School versus New School, I have a chapter that's dedicated to it. There's a reason for it. Like it changes everything. It literally changes everything. Like you start to see how people move in a completely different way than you've ever looked at it. And you start to understand that the fascial system is pulling on everything else. And even all the feel or lack of feel that guys have is related to it because it innervates into everything. Right. And in the beginning, I had people just like you said, people read anatomy trains. People like fucking take a course in myofascial release and think, oh, yeah, I know the fascia. I know the fascia. We just got to loosen it. Like, no, you don't. You don't know shit. Like keep digging. Like you're not even close. Unless you're viewing that as like everything, then you're not seeing anything because it's the reason that the kid. It's like I'm tired of people saying they believe in science and then saying, "Oh, well, that guy's just a freak. He's just different. He just built different." That's the dumbest thing I've ever heard. How you say you believe in science, but you're not interested in the fact that that fucking kid weighs 155 pounds and throws 96? Like, what the fuck are we doing? Sorry about my Latin. Now I'm getting fired up. It's crazy.
the
Like, there's
paradox should be explored, not thrown out. Dude, the amount of
Yes, there's
time.
a reason that, and people should be interested when the weakest guy on the team or the guy that's not the strongest, the strongest guy on the team is never the best player. And the we should be interested in creating more of the best players that hit the ball the hardest, throw the ball the hardest, do it the healthiest, right? There's a reason why they're able to do that. And it's not that they, it's not fucking Superman. They didn't like take some sort of magic pill, right? There's something that their system is clearly doing differently than everybody else, and that's what became so interesting to me. It's like when I started to go down these routes and do all this training and see the results that were happening in front of me. Like when you have some 14-year-old kid pucking balls 94 and you get him in a biomechanics lab and the kid can throw 125 pitches in a game and throw long toss the next day because he feels so good. Like, but then everybody wants to tell him, well, you're going to get hurt if you keep doing that. You're going to get hurt. Well, how about you go get an MRI or an ultrasound on his arm? And how about you take a look at the actual structuring of it? And after you find out that it's beautifully intact and then realize, holy shit, that guy's really young. He throws really, really abnormally hard, but his elbow is in better condition than this other kid who's 6'4", 225, throws like shit and his arm hurts. every day and he only throws 82. Like, if that doesn't change your mind, like you have a problem.
When you're working with these athletes, this is because you said something where it's like lack of feel versus athletes that feel. Dan is he's one of my favorite case studies of just looking at an athlete that dude when he talks about the sport, when you watch him swing, he is feeling something that is different than what other people are feeling. And you watch it at the highest level, man. When I talk to my best athletes, the way they describe in which they're feeling something, man, it's so cool, but it's like so subjective. Joel Smith talks about like the feminine versus the masculine side of training, and like we're so masculine, we avoid all of the subjective, like feeling based side of things. And I know, like you also mentioned how like the cue doesn't matter. It's like how the athlete processes that cue and like feels that cue. But it's like how do you get athletes that aren't feeling it? Like is that the gift that they have, or is that something that you are actively working on, like training them to be able to like get to that point in which they can feel these things?
You're definitely training them to get to that point. It's a degree of proprioception and brain body connection that happens when a system is connected. The more it's connected, the more reps there are, and the more it gets connected to the tip of the whip, the better the ability to feel those things. So there's part of it that's a training component, right? Because it's like all the nerves run and innervate through that fascial system. Right? And when you have think about the fascial system as this, uh, imagine that if you're looking at a human body, forget about everything on the inside, forget about all of it, right? And just imagine there's a Spider-Man suit. And some people's Spider-Man suit is like kind of loose, right? And floppy, and other people's Spider-Man suit is like super tight. Okay. Um, just because the Spider-Man suit, and this needs to be said, is super tight, doesn't mean when they move around, they look stiff. That's
Mhm.
not what it means. Okay. People, when you watch like
And is
an
this
athlete like
before you go
Trick,
in, is this when you're talking about your athletes? I know I've heard you say this a bunch of times. Are you always say are you a loose or tight athlete? Like when you're doing some of your warm-up drills and you have your loose athletes do some drills, your tight athletes do some drills. Is that the same principle that you're talking about here?
yes.
Yeah,
So,
I've heard you
so
mention that. That's a super cool way of looking at it.
But when you have an elite athlete, generally they're very tight. Like their fascial system is very tight.
Mm.
But that fascial system, when you think about the human body and its design, like your joints aren't supposed to touch. They're not supposed to be compacted. And when people think of tight as an athlete, automatically in their head, because their lack of understanding of how the human body is actually designed, they think of this person's being tight as like, oh, their bone is compacted on bone. No, that is not what it means. Is that a thing? Yeah, old people, right? Like, and we could get into that later if you want, because we fix that stuff too. But it's not that the bone is compacted on the bone. It's like we have these ligaments on the inside that hold the bones together so they don't get ripped apart, right? But then we have this fascial system on the outside, this tension that's literally holding the bones apart in tension. It's holding them apart, creating space for all that beautiful synovial fluid in there. So you get like, freedom of move. But when you have a rotational sport, you need springs that are built like this, right? They have to be built like this so that fascial system gets tightly wound this way. That doesn't mean that they have bone compacted on bone. It means that they have springs built in their joints rotationally as well as vertically, right? So just because an athlete is tight like that doesn't mean when they move around they look stiff or tight. In fact, like if they're moved, that's the whole point of building tension. When you build that kind of tension in an athlete's system and build that kind of twitch in those joints and you build those kind of springs, man, they're able to be so passive and loose and have everything shut off. And then just in an instantaneous moment, they're gone. Like the whole point is building the athletes so it can be effortless, so it can be easy, so they don't have to try so hard, and you don't want these big loading and unloading phases. The farther you have to go, the harder it's going to be to repeat, the less you can do inside of a time constraint and window, which is why it's so stupid the way everybody looks at it, so
It,
so the field thing, back to the field thing. So like when you have this interconnected system, those nerves like run and innervate through all that stuff. So it's like you're building a way to think about it would be if I have a rubber band and it's a really thin one. And then I start to get like 10 really thin ones and congeal them, right? And now they're together, right? And there's some tension there. Like those nerves run through all that stuff. So the signals firing, the ability to like feel this here, right? Because the higher speed of the movement, like through the initiation of it, the less feel you're going to have at the end of the chain, right? But the slower the speed, the more feel you have at the end of the chain. And everything that we're talking about in rotational explosive movement, like swinging, throwing, golfing, throwing a football, it's a buildup of a sequence of deceleration, right? Where one piece has to stop, the next piece has to stop, and then the next piece has to stop. And then the faster you do that, and the cleaner the buildup of speed to the tip of the whip, the better the feel you have at the end. If you take that same athlete and you have them try to do it as fast, like one of the things Paff and McMillan talk about all the time, you never take an ECM driven athlete and make them train at 100%. It's the worst thing that you can do. You want to be suboptimal in terms of effort level and then get to the closest, the 85, 90 percentile output with that suboptimal effort level. So we build the rhythm and coordination, right? At the tip of the whip to get to the tip of the whip. And then the competition in the moment brings out that very unique energy level that allows the guy to sit 94 in the bullpen and make it look like he's playing catch. And then as soon as he steps on the mound in the game, it's 102.
When you
And
have
they,
working, let's say you're working with an athlete. I'm gonna put myself end of one study, but I have plenty of athletes that are like this, where I've had the feel of being loose. I've had the feel of like letting things happen. And then when it gets to a game and it's like you want to hit a ball 1 million miles an hour and you like kind of revert back to that, like, I'm gonna grab, I'm gonna go, like I need to make this happen. Is that just a more reps of the feel thing? Is that just like a training piece of it? Like, how are you getting these athletes to actually adapt and like be comfortable with that, like kind of letting the body do what it's supposed to do? And like when I'm the best hitter, I'm the best jumper, the best sprinter, it's like it's letting it happen. It's like almost like letting go, but it's like when you have a very like type A type athlete where it's like they want to create, they want to force it, like they want to control the thing that, and for a lot of athletes too, this is another thing. It's like they've had decent success to get to where they've got. That's why they hold on to those beliefs. That's why they hold on to, I made this happen. I made this happen. It's like to take that
but
next step.
but you're mentioning it in a way, I'm sorry to cut you off, but the way that you're shaping the question is that you can't control it. But there's a
Mm,
lot of athletes that have, just because like certain people, the people that write the books, don't understand how people control it, doesn't mean that they don't have the ability to. Those
mm,
people that are writing the books just don't understand. Like there are guys that absolutely can make the thing happen that they want to happen and repeat it like more often. Like that's why you hear big leaguers specifically in baseball. Like if you listen to the best that they've ever played, they talk about, what they're doing with their hands at the moment going into impact, or what they're doing with their hands at the moment of release. And to these other people that like, they look at sports science and say, oh, well, that's not possible. I don't, that's not possible. I can't, that's how you can't do that at the, but that person, that's why that person's writing a book. And
the other one's
and
making millions.
that's right. And people it's like it's like it's not important if they can't measure it. It's like the whole thing with I was talking to the kids the other day about clutch, right? Because there was a conversation about that, like science can't prove that if you ask anybody that's ever played a sport at a really high level, they're going to tell you that there's people that are clutch, right? They have a unique ability in those moments to step up and get things done. But because there's no way for science to quantify it, it must not be real, right? It's like I heard Epstein say, and this was such a great quote of his, like, we're making things important in sport right now because we can measure them. We're not measuring them because they're important. Like
Mm,
we miss the understanding that there's people that, and that's what the skill acquisition community like doesn't get. Like the research hasn't gone far enough yet for them to understand some of those things. There are pre-planned strategies. Now, there's certain sports where that is different than other sports, right? But there are pre-planned strategies, and especially feel, that exist at the highest level. And that doesn't mean all guys operate in that space. But I think many of the best, many of the best do. And as far as allowing it to come out or shaping the environment for them to get to that point, like I have I was reading a book on nuclear engineering. It was like dynamic systems theory, and there was a model in there for how they program and teach people, because you're talking about a highly complex thing at a nuclear power plant, and a bunch of steps that have to get followed. And if this happens and you don't handle it this way, like the whole town blows up, bro. Like it's a problem. So they have to make sure and test and retest that people understand protocols. So in my book, one of the things that I present is a model that we utilize for shaping and understanding the development of the athlete. It's like you're learning the pattern, right, in its most basic form, right? So like we teach a lot of our hitting and throwing through movement work that happens prior to when they step in the cage,
Hmm.
right? Because when people have a bat in their hand and they're trying to strike a ball, or they're trying to throw a ball over a plate, they often get so locked into the mode that they're used to, they're unable to make any kind of scaled or major changes right away, right? So it's like when you can take them out of that context, right, to a place where they're not as emotionally attached to the end result, right? Even though it's in a training environment and it doesn't matter, all of a sudden you can create the new environment for, hey, do me a favor, try these three different ways with this bag or this medicine ball or this, and then tell me which one feels the strongest to you, right? And then they go through that. It's like, well, it's interesting because I would have thought that this one would have been the best, but I actually think this one was. And then share with them that, well, actually, the RSI on that, like your rotational strength, or how hard you threw that medicine ball, you're right, it was harder when you did that. And then it's like, oh, wait a second, can I do that when I hit? Can I do that? Oh, now it's your idea. Now you're
It's
now.
planted.
Yeah, yeah, yeah. Now it's because when you're working with high level athletes, sometimes they need to be the ones that have the idea. You don't really care how we get there as long as we get to the end result. So then you continue the process, and it's easier to do things through staged skills. So if a ball is not moving, it's much easier to feel and do than if it is. And then it's moving slowly, and then it's moving faster. So we'll go from a T, or variations of T and variations of bats, and then we'll go to toss, and then we'll go to BP, and then we'll go to a machine or a live arm. And live arm is the best. Machine and live arm they're not the same. People want to think they are, but they're just not. Machines actually screw a lot of players up often. But yeah, yeah. So like we stage it through that process, and then just try to iterate the best we can it's not like it's a one size fits all. You're trying to move people along as quickly as you can, while also regressing them to the things that they really need. And the truth is also that, like, you can completely change the whole thing without ever getting to a machine and without ever progressing it that far, because the athlete has such good feel for what they're doing. They know they got it. Like and that doesn't mean they can hold on to it forever. And that's where the navigating comes in, right? That's where the continued work with an athlete and helping them. Okay, because like just because you're doing a drill, and you mentioned it earlier, just because somebody does it, like somebody will come in for a 3-day evaluation, and we will create some sort of result. Like maybe their exit velos went up 7 miles an hour, their barrel consistency and ball striking, their throwing velocity, their arm health, like their arm feels so much better, it's best it ever felt. And they're doing this series of drills that has helped, because we look at like what we after we go through the process initially with the evaluation, then we go into testing a bunch of things, right? But based on how you move, we're going to go with this, and this. We're going to go through this process of exploration. And then after that, we're going to go through more exploration. And basically, we're trying to try as many flavors of ice cream inside of their windows as possible. That way, before they leave, we can have like a robust collection of things that have worked and have felt good, that created some sort of desired result. Now, later on, you might get a video of a guy doing the same drill 3 weeks later, and he's not doing it the same.
Mhm.
He's not doing it the same. So that's where navigating that stuff comes in.
And that's it sounds like almost like a psychedelic like approach to like skill acquisition in a sense. Like where we had a neuroscientist talk come on and like one of his thought processes is that these elite level athletes have a high level like BDNF. And like I see it a lot in football where you were talking about how elite level hitters, they're talking about like certain things with their hands. One of the coolest things I see is like listening to elite level pass rushers talk about what they are feeling and seeing when they're pass rushing. I'm like, dude, how are you seeing and feeling all of this in that speed of a game? Like I was a defensive lineman, like pushing to league, trying to like do high level stuff with that. And like when I was doing it, it was like I was not feeling it at that level. And the only time I've ever got to a point in which I like have felt that is like microdosing psilocybin before going to do like a skill session. And then I'm like, oh, dude, this is how their brains are like wired at all moments. It is so cool to like they're talking to this Denver pass rusher. He was at one of the psychedelic conferences that I went to, and he was talking about it too. But it's like it's seeing things almost before and like feeling things before in like this slow-mo fashion. And that's like when I saw that and felt it, it's like I want to give like that psychedelic like approach without psychedelics. Obviously, I'm not handing them out to my athletes, but like the psychedelic like approach to skill acquisition and feel in my environments for my athletes. Because once you get it, man, it's like it's different. It's like, oh, I know, like you said, it doesn't always stick forever. I have that issue too, but it's like now that I have been there, I know that I'm not there anymore. And I'm like, okay, like, so I catch it quicker. I'm like, I need to come back to this state, this feel, whatever it is. But before you're exposed to that, like, I think it's the same as like being exposed to like a psychedelic like trip where it's like, before you're exposed to that, you don't even know you're not there. You don't even know you haven't felt that before. And I think that's such a cool, like, way to look at like athletics with your athletes.
Yeah, for sure. That's super cool. And I would love to, we're gonna have to have another talk sometime. I'd be curious to hear more about what that was like, what that
Oh yeah, dude.
experience.
I'm talking to Dan about making a trip down to the Mecca with you guys, so that would be sweet.
Yeah,
But
sick.
before we get you off this podcast here, one of the things I want to talk to you about is deceleration work because this is something that I had not heard before you guys started talking about it. It's something that made a massive difference, and it's something that I think you talked about, like how you were working with a bunch of different athletes and a bunch of different sports. But it's like I have seen what you were talking about when it comes to hitting. I have seen that in football. I've seen that in every sport, or like wrestling, jujitsu, where it's like, dude, it's their ability to like boom, and it's like I talk about this all the time. My freshman year at St. Thomas. I was cleaning 350 pounds. I thought I was the man, dude. Like, I'm like, I walk in day one of this weight room, I clean up 350 pounds. I look to my left, senior linebacker that's starting. He's like upright rowing 185, worst form ever. I'm like, dude, I'm set. I got this sport figured out. Like, I'm going to dominate. We went to practice that same day. We had an ISO rep. I was a fullback at the time. That dude met me in the hole. And dude, I have never been hit harder in my entire life. I was flat on my ass. He patted me on the head. He's like, you got it next time, bro. And like, that was such a like eye-opening moment of, oh my God. I do not have this figured out. There is something different here. Watching Dan hit with your philosophies was one of the very similar things. I'm like, dude, he is doing something different. And then he had me work with some of this deceleration work. And I'm like, dude, that is something that I need to grab and like apply to all of these other sports and all these other avenues. What is that? Why is that not talked about? What is that? The ability to do that, man. It's such like a
Because
different
again,
philosophy.
the world leads us in a different direction than what actually happens. It's like things become a thing when everybody does the opposite. Like kids get told to turn their back foot because nobody does. They get told to turn their hips because they don't naturally. They get told to, throw over the top because they don't naturally. Like, at the end of the day, you're throwing a punch. Like you're not kicking a ball. Like everyone wants to talk about force coming from the ground up. I got news for you guys. It ain't true. That ain't how it works. The force comes from us. We have to apply it to the ground and it gets read at the ground. It doesn't come from the fucking ground. It doesn't come from the ground. It comes from us. Using our legs is not getting in them and fucking pushing out of them. It's taking our upper body, building energy around our backside, and then sending it like a freight train through our legs into the floor, right? And for our system to work optimally, our pelvis has to stop first, then our trunk has to stop, then we can deliver. Then we can deliver the arm, then we can deliver the barrel. I literally, dude, last year I was down at my with my buddy. I was down at spring training and I went to go visit him in Orlando. And he coaches a high school team down there. And I spent a couple hours of practice. And I was like, like, what can I do for you guys? Yada, yada, yada. And he's like, well, like we're, not a big time program. What we could really use, small school, what we could really use is some velo. We got some guys that can throw strikes, but we could use a little bit more velocity. So I see this kid get on the mound. He's probably he's a junior. He's probably 6'2", 215 pounds, decent looking kid, fairly physical. And he throws a ton of strikes, but he's like 76, 78, right? Like 76, 78. Watch him throw one pitch. We have all this film. I have all this recorded because I had the camera crew with me because we were down there working with players for spring training. So I go out to the mound after he throws the pitch. I said, let me ask you a question, son. Where do you think you're getting your power from? He says, legs and my hips. I said, right, that's the problem. That isn't true. Right. And I explained to him, I said, if you were doing if I had a cable machine and I racked it full of weight and I said, I want you to grab it with your hands. And when I say go, I want you to move it as fast as you can, but I want you to do it with your hips. Like, that's not going to work out very well. You're going to tear up your L5S1. Like your lower half, your pelvis is not meant to move the weight of your trunk. That's not, the lower body is not yanking the upper body through. That is not how the system works. Right. But that's how people see it, because when they look on video, they say, oh, well, when I look here, I see that the pelvis is rotating to this many degrees. It's already going to rotate. The job is not to get it to rotate. The job is to get it to stop rotating as quickly as possible so the next piece of the sequence can take over, and then get that piece to stop so the next piece can take over. And then we have smoothness, control, and precision, and our body turns into a brick wall at release or impact. So I explained, I didn't explain all that to the kid. I said the cable machine thing. And then I said, okay, well, if you're going to throw a punch, would you try to do this first? Right. And he's like, he laughed at me. He goes, yeah, no. And I said, okay, do me a favor. On this next pitch, I want you to pretend like you don't even have legs. Like, just lift your leg, right? Let your weight just use the slope, let it carry down. And then I want you to throw the nastiest right hook that you've ever thrown in your life. I'm talking haymaker, all from up top. Bro, the next fucking pitch was 86. It was 86. He went up like 10 fucking miles. It was eight, and the rest of his pen was like that. It was like 84, 86 the whole time. And it literally just took a conversation. That was it. Just took a conversation. Like, people misunderstand and misapply sports science all of the time. Like, they want to talk about the lower half and they want to talk about the legs, but they don't want to talk about what is actually like. First principles. Can I swing a bat with just my legs? No. Can I sit on my butt and swing a bat like this? Yes, I can. Right. So the movement is being driven from up here and it's building around the back side of it and then through the front side of it. And it's the timing, sequencing, and coordination of the upper body moving in a flux of opposite directions at the same time and hitting the end points at the right timing, right, inside of those movements. And it exists that way in football, baseball, like, it doesn't matter what it is. When you watch Steph Curry shoot, right, his feet are a little offset this way, right? From, like, his feet are this way and he's right hand. So his toes are a little this way and his upper body's this way to shoot. And then when he shoots at the ends, his lower body goes the other direction while he's in the air. He can't, that's something that is naturally happening. And you have to optimize those things for each individual. That's exactly what I was kind of alluding to earlier, where it's the function is the same, right? But the degrees and the ranges and those things are, different for different people.
Dude, hell yeah. That's money.
All human beings walk the foundation to human locomotion, walking, crawling, and running. You don't have to teach anyone how to do it. And not even left-handed pitchers walk same arm, same leg.
Last 5 to 10 seconds of this podcast. I don't need you to dive in deep. I know we've been taking a lot of time here out of your day, but coaches, athletes that are stuck in a traditional model listening to this stuff for the first time, they don't have a ton of like background in this. Is there something they can try or do right now listening to this where they can get some of these feels and be like, okay, I can get a feel or understanding what he's talking about within my own body so I can start to dive deep into these things? Is there anything like that where you're like, go try this and then get back to me and then like look at all my stuff? I promise I'm not lying.
Uh, yeah. Um, it's a hard thing to try to give a universal understanding that's going to change the shape of someone's okay, let me ask you this. So you haven't been here, but you spend time with somebody that we've trained and spent some time working with. What was it for you?
Close stance and the Curry look back was the thing that got me hooked. He had me do some Curry look backs, and I was like, "What, dude?" Like legitimately, like my max exit velo with a base softball was like 110. That day I was sitting at like 106, 106, but swinging as hard as humanly possible. Dan was like, "Dude, try this Curry look back." I tried to Curry look back. I wasn't, dude. I was swinging, not even like hitting, and it was perfect line drive ball at 110 consistently. And I was like, "Dude, what did you just give me? What did you just do to
You
me?"
experience the same guy can hit the ball this way and hit it this way, and it's totally different, but they're achieving the same output.
Dude, with 40% of the effort,
Yeah, yeah.
40% of the effort doing everything that
That's your question. So if you think about speed accuracy trade-off, right? Like Bernstein, if I have a hammer and a nail, right, I could perfectly strike it every time inside the small window, or I could try to strike it as hard as I can with everything I have and break all my fingers. Right? It's about finding that right time to step on the gas pedal. And it's like being able to bank the turn at the right time and create the force in the right ways. Like everything early on has to be passive in the movement so you can lay into the ball and brace up on impact. And just by changing the nature of your head position, right, your trunk was no longer capable of rotating as far, right? And as a result, you created a better stopping moment with less effort with your upper body, which braced and stabilized the system underneath it, right? So you were able to control the effort and the ease and then whack. So I'll give you two things. So one, I'd encourage everybody to play around with directions of stride or angle of stride or just angle of initial setup because these in all sport as a human body we're built to rotate, right? And people want to look at this like especially in baseball, softball, like well, because the home plate is here and the pitcher's mound is there. I have to keep everything this way in a linear fashion rather than understanding the nature of the rotational body. Like our upper body has to rotate and our lower body has to anchor against the rotation of the upper body. Because if you're going to open a jar, it's got to open in opposite directions. And if it's being driven by this, the better this holds on against, the faster we're going to get to the end point. And everybody has different ranges of endpoint in their lead hip. Some guys have more internal rotation there than others. So if you don't explore those angles, you never figure out where your endpoint is to the middle of the field. You could do whatever the hell you want with your swing and training, but if you're not in the right position for you or in the right setup, you're going to keep yanking off balls and not be able to cover balls on the outer half no matter what you do with your swing because your body is not in the right position. Just like optimizing a squat position. If somebody's in a shit squat position, you're not just going to add load. You're gonna change the nature and the positioning of the body to optimize how they're able to move the weight. It's the same exact process we go through in our evaluations here. So one, I would say that. Two, I would say if you're a golfer or a hitter or another really good one. Is we often explain to people like I'll give them this cue. I'll say, okay, and I've seen it work with big leaguers and 10-year-olds. It works really good with young kids a lot of the time. You say, okay, well, I want you to imagine you got two walls over there, and one's brick and the other one's foam. Okay. And you were going to play a game where you're going to throw the ball against the wall to see how far it could bounce off. Which one do you think the ball would bounce farther off of? Everybody says brick. So then you have them raise their hands and then hit them in the stomach a couple times. Then ask them, okay, what do you feel? What's happening internally there? What is that? And they'll say like flexing, bracing, tensing. Oh, kind of like turning into a brick wall. Do me a favor and do that at impact, and let's see what happens.
That's a good one. That's
Yeah.
the what drill
Bruce
did you
Lee,
call that?
Bruce Lee 1 inch punch. It's a Bruce Lee 1 inch punch. That's what you're trying to do and hit. Anytime you have a limited window of time and space, you're trying to optimize the precision, but also maximize laying your mass into the object and transferring the force. To be able to do that, it's not about generating the speed, it's about turning into a brick wall.
At the right time. And when you do it, I'm telling you, he's not full of shit. I'm telling you, once you do it, once you get that feel of it, it's a totally different game. But Coach, I want to say thank you for coming on. You have changed my swing. You have changed my philosophy around a lot of things. It has been extremely helpful. And Dan and I are going to make a trip out to the Mecca here, hopefully soon.
That's awesome, brother. Well, I appreciate you having me on. It was a great conversation, and looking forward to when you guys come out, man. You should come out to Bridge the Gap. We do a coaches convention the beginning in December, the 5th through the 8th. And we have a whole bunch of our draft athletes for this next class and some of our current pros and and we kind of yeah, it's a pretty cool deal. So we do a bunch of different speaking, but a lot of it's very hands-on. So at conventions, a lot of times people, it's you're sitting in the rows and looking at the presentations. Like we did it like that for a long time, but then we started playing around with flipping the model and bringing people in-house and doing training sessions and letting them watch how we work with our athletes and then getting mic'd up and sharing everything. And that's what it's kind of like. So it's pretty cool.
Absolutely. Thank you guys for listening. Keep chopping wood.
Thank you for listening. Join us next week as we dive down another rabbit hole. If you enjoyed the show, don't forget to like, subscribe, and leave a 5-star rating. Follow us on Instagram at Austin Yoakum to stay updated on future podcast guests. Keep chopping wood.